Welcome to Archidekt Decronomicon, the Archidekt podcast. This is the second episode. They said we couldn't do it. They said we probably shouldn't do it, but we're doing it.
Only a few years late.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So we should probably first mention why we're doing this. We like to keep people informed of what we're doing. We don't want the community to think that we are just doing nothing. Specifically because we're working on a lot of infrastructure under the hood right now. So we don't have a lot of flashy updates, though I think our recent one was pretty flashy. So we like to keep people posted. And we do that in our Discord. We try to do that on Twitter. But we've been told that this is a good medium for that, so we're gonna do it another time. See if we make it to Decronomicon 3. But for now, we're gonna talk a bit about the current state of Archidekt. Oh my gosh, we should probably introduce ourselves.
We probably should. My name is Michael. I am one of the devs on Archidekt.
And I'm Andy. I am the other dev on Archidekt. And just so I can reiterate this, and we do often, when you ask the Archidekt team to do something, you are talking to us. This is the team. We have brought on Jeremy, who helps us with our moderating and stuff on Archidekt and on Twitter and stuff, so you sometimes talk to him, but when you ask the team to do something, that's us.
Hello!
Regardless, let's get into the current state of Archidekt. So, I think the best place to start is kind of talking about the things that we've done since the last Decronomicon, which was roughly 2 years ago, right?
Checks watch. Yes.
Cool. 2 years ago. Nothing at all has happened in the world in the last 2 years. It's been really chill.
Sometimes it feels that way. It feels like no time has passed since then. When we checked the date from the previous episode, we both kind of had to do a double take.
It's wild.
It is.
And we'll get into this later about some of the things we're looking forward to going forward, and some of it is just getting back together. We talked about this a bit in our previous podcast, but Mike and I have been friends for a very long time, and our Magic experience is mostly hanging out with friends and doing things. So the past 2 years has been difficult for us as well, not having that. But we have the internet. So, Mike, you want to talk to me on the internet right now and record it?
Right now? Over the internet?
Yeah, over the internet. We
that
have
sounds
the technology.
The best.
Cool.
Yeah, let's hit it. So, what have we been doing for the past 2 years working on Archidekt? Just from the top, we've got a list of features here that we've put out over the past few years. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but these are some of the highlights that we feel have greatly improved the experience for brewing on the site. So the first one is, of course, multiple categories. It was one of the most requested features before it was implemented. And for those of you who don't know what that is or what that means, it's basically allowing users to categorize a single card into multiple custom categories. So, a good example.
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Yeah. We always use the Solemn Simulacrum example. It is a card that everyone uses and does many things. So you would have, for example, a ramp category, a card draw category, and Solemn Simulacrum you could put in both. The way we handle it is we have a primary category that every card has, and then you can add secondary categories. So if you switch your view to multiple category view, it will show the primary category of the card. The card will be in there its normal opacity, and a secondary category of the card, as many as they are, will show up there, but slightly more opaque, or less opaque, I'm sorry. It will be a bit lighter, or darker if you're in dark mode, which is actually something that we added since our last update.
Yeah, that's not on the list, is it?
Yeah, no, but there you go. And by the way, the reason that we're mentioning a lot of these things is we get requests for multiple categories still every once in a while. So we are not the best at letting people know through our interface where features are and what we have, and we understand that, and we're trying to work on that. But for now, we're just letting you know what you have in case you didn't know we had multiple categories. That you can find in the card modal, which is just a menu that you can open up by clicking the arrow on a card and deck. That was actually a change that we made since our last podcast. Originally, we just had a pop-out that came out to the right. And while it was nice to kind of keep it all on the same visual page, the pop-out would move around. It would go in different places that you didn't expect. It wasn't great user experience. So we moved that to its own menu, and it gives you more chance to have different interactions with the card.
There's also just a lot more going on in that card modal now than we could have ever fit within those card pop-ups. So it was definitely a good choice to move in that direction.
Such as a custom CMC that you can set for a card. This was another big request that we got a lot. So we have lots of statistics in the upper right corner of a deck. You can expand and look at stats for a deck, which was another thing some users didn't know. And one of them, of course, is a mana curve chart. And what people don't like is when their Cyclonic Rift is on the 2 slot for that chart. They want to see it on 7. And there are a couple of other ones, like X spells. You don't want to see those on the 1 CMC. You want to place those somewhere where you generally would use them. So in that card modal, the menu that we've been talking about, you can set a custom CMC for a card. An example, of course, would be Cyclonic Rift, changing it from 2 to 7. And then for the statistics of the deck, the average CMC, and looking at that chart, it then uses your custom CMC. Though, perhaps we shouldn't use the term CMC anymore, as Wizards has changed it. Do you know what they changed it to, Mike?
Mana cost?
Mana value.
Mana value.
Yes, so we'll keep it CMC for a while because I think that's what people know, but eventually it's possible we should change that over to mana value so newer people know what we're talking about.
Reminds me of
how long do you think that's going to stay in the game? In the lexicon of the game.
Mana value?
CMC.
Oh, forever.
Forever? You think people are just going to be saying it? New players are going to be like, what are you talking about?
I mean, there's a few things like that in Magic, aren't there? Where the players who have just been playing the game for like 10 plus years, and it's just like, yeah, this used to be called that. None are coming to my head, but I know that those exist.
Yeah, none are coming to my head. Mana burn is one of the ones that older players like to reminisce about. Regardless, another feature that we came up with since then is allowing multiple price sources. We currently allow 4 different price sources: Card Kingdom, TCG Player, Card Hoarder, and Card Market. And sometimes people like to compare costs or look at a paper cost and an MTGO cost at the same time. We basically made it so you can look at 2 below a card at all times rather than the 1 in the corner that we used to have. And then you can select which 2 of those are, and you can make an account setting. Account settings is also probably a relatively recent feature where you can set a lot of these things that we're talking about by default for your account, which is just helpful because there are at this point many different ways to view a deck on Archidekt. So making sure that every time you log in, it's the way you want to see it is important.
Speaking of viewing things in the way that you want to view them, that's a pretty good segue into deck folders, which is yet another new feature that came within the past year or so, probably closer to 18 months for that one. And it really need no explanation. It gives users a way to organize their many decks, and I'm sure, as most of us can imagine, most users have a lot of decks, so organizing them into theory crafted, built, deconstructed, etc., is pretty helpful.
Yeah. A bit more fun. Well, depends who you ask. Fun or controversial, however you want to look at it, feature that we've added is salt sums. About a month or 2 ago, EDHREC did a new round of voting for their salt scores. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's the idea that we're going to crowdsource voting through the community for people to vote from 0 to 4 how salty a card makes them in EDH. And we compile those together and get an average for each card. So EDHREC has been doing that for a while. And what we did is we sought to sum those together for a deck and get a salt sum for a deck. And then once we had that number, it didn't really tell us a whole lot. We'd just say, hey, your salt sum is 40, and people were like, cool, whatever. So what we did is we got a distribution of salt scores throughout the entire site, the hundreds of thousands of EDH decks that we have. And we took the distribution of that, made a chart, put the average in the center. Wasn't a normal distribution, so sorry to all you statistic people out there. It is not a perfect bell curve. But regardless, we can show you where you are on that distribution chart for your salt. So the further to the right you are on that curve, the saltier your deck is.
Which, of course, doesn't actually mean anything. But it is a fun metric to look at, nonetheless.
No, and we did have a disclaimer in a thing there that please do not use this number to be a power level for your deck, or more importantly, a power level for other people's decks. Don't flat out refuse to play with someone if they have a salt score higher than average or anything. This is just a fun little thing. We have found just in our own play group, and we had a blast, sending salt scores back and forth to each other. We have found in our play group that, it sometimes follows like our perception of saltiness, but then some of our saltiest decks receive a lower than average salt score, and some decks that we'd have no issue playing have an oddly high salt score just because they sum up some cards that happen to be high.
Yeah, it's usually having one or two outliers in the deck that really raise the number.
Yeah, so use this as a fun piece of data to just kind of exchange between friends. Don't use it as a power level score. And to that end, there is a little, eyeball icon next to it. You can click that to turn it off if it is a feature that you don't want to, have for front and center while you are deck brewing. We definitely understand that. I think that covers most of the things that we've done since that. I mean, actually, it doesn't. We have done tons and tons of tiny things since our last podcast. What we've been doing a lot of is hearing feedback and implementing that feedback. And that's come in two ways. One, bug fixes. You guys, as the community, have been fantastic about reporting to us on our forums or on Twitter what is wrong with Archidekt, whether it be a bug or just pain points. And we've done our best to fix those. So please keep them coming, because that is how we fix bugs. Hearing from you, we do our best to implement those. And the other thing that we've been doing is when people just ask for quality of life improvements, we try and get those out as well. So there have been tons and tons of small things since the last update. And if you are curious of doing that, on the homepage, which is now reworked, on the right side, you can see our news articles. Just go through some change logs, and we have a pretty good record of all those small little things that we've been adding over time. But again, thank you to all of you for requesting those improvements and bug fixes.
Yeah, beyond that, there, as Andy was alluding to, there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes outside of the big splashy, flashy features that get released. Namely, a lot of code maintenance has been happening. This project, when we started this project, I think we chatted about this a bit in the first episode of the podcast. That being, when we first started working on Archidekt, while both of us had just graduated from with degrees in software, we were by no means advanced in our field at writing very good maintainable code. If any devs are out there, I'm sure you know exactly what we're alluding to. Anyway, what this means is that Archidekt, what we've been working on is really maintaining, really reining in a lot of notorious pieces of code, whether that be through bug fixes or whether that be through making things easier to implement for the future, so that it's just easier when someone says, hey, we want super cool new feature X, and we're just go, hey, no problem, that'll be easy peasy to throw in there. And that's just something that we've been working on behind the scenes.
For you non-technical folk out there, there's a term for this. It's called tech debt. It's the concept that as your project exists over time, there are just things that become dated or were not built maintainable in the first place, that over time, regardless of the fact that your project is still probably working, there are just things that get old over time. And this is something that you need to work on. And we have been trying to keep up with it, but any software engineer will tell you that it's always a not necessarily a losing battle, but an uphill battle fighting against tech debt.
You can never get rid of it.
You can never get rid of it. Exactly. So if there are any technical people out there, Mike and I have been converting a lot of things to TypeScript. For those of you that don't know what that means, don't worry about it. It just means that we are rewriting a lot of code. But that helps us in the future. It helps us find bugs as we're writing them, and it helps us more quickly write code because it's just easier to deal with.
Also helps us prevent bugs from going out in the first place, which is awesome.
For sure. Yep. Yeah, so we apologize that as updates come out, that's not the most interesting thing to hear, that we converted 50 files to a new file format. I know you guys don't want to hear that, but it is helping. It means that we code less bugs and can get rid of them faster.
And we can implement new stuff faster.
Yeah, well, which
ideally
is a great segue into what people probably care more about us talking about than things we've had before, is things we're going to work on in the future.
One of the main features, and I think we actually discussed this in our first podcast as well, that being the idea of having a history of a deck. Right now on Archidekt, we have a undo and redo button and a save button, and whenever you're editing a deck, we maintain some amount of history for you when you're editing, but once you save, everything gets blown away, and that is, boom, fresh, the copy that you have. But wouldn't it be nice, wouldn't it be ideal if over the course of, weeks, months, years that some of us play certain decks, if you could view the history of that deck as it evolved with you as a player. And beyond that, it's helpful just for finding cards that you are like, hey, I know that I had this in some deck at some point. Where is it? I've moved it, or it used to be in this, so on and so forth. It could, not to mention, it could just be a fun feature to just kind of take a stroll down memory lane, as it were, if you can pop back into your pet deck from 2 years ago and say, hey, this is what it used to look like, and this is what it looks like now. Beyond that, it offers us a lot more data. Currently we aren't really storing that data. So when and if we implement deck history, it will start with nothing, because right now all we have of that data is backups, and it's not particularly parsable as far as like maintaining a deck history currently. But once we start doing that, over time you can track the usage of cards through time, and you can track the usage of certain deck archetypes through time. It really just exposes a lot more data points to us as a team, and to therefore everyone as users, because we can expose that similarly to how we're exposing a bell curve for salt sums over all EDH decks. Just being able to view that kind of big data is super duper interesting.
Yeah, and that's a common trend. We like data.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, well, getting back to the salt score, some people think that score can be harmful to the community, and I definitely get where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, we love data. We just love looking at numbers and seeing the trends between decks and things, and deck history is just another thing that's going to allow us to look at trends and stuff on our decks. And I think that does resonate with a lot of brewers. They like to see stats for what they're doing. And one thing that I would like to mention about the deck history thing is it does circle back a bit to our tech debt conversation. We've probably been talking about deck history and a couple of the other things that we're still going to be working on for a long time now. And to the outside, I could certainly understand how that's like, well, you were talking about deck history a year and a half ago. Why don't we have deck history? The way that Mike and I built some of these things were great for what Archidekt was at the time, but us not thinking of deck history at the time that we built it means that some of this stuff is not built well for deck history. So we have to actually redesign some of the base architecture of Archidekt. How about that? So that we can do it for deck history. So that's why it's not just like, we're ignoring this. It's more like, this would probably take us a fair bit of time to gut some code. Something that we do want to do, but all these other features that we've talked about us working on in the meantime have taken a slight priority. And hopefully, probably near future, hopefully before Decronomicon number 3, we will have deck history. And the way that we want to build deck history leads us into our next kind of long-term goal, and that's collaborative editing. We often describe this as Google Docs for Archidekt. So think being able to go into a Google Doc, if you've used them before, and edit at the same time as someone else. That's the kind of thing that we would want to do for editing, because we have found ourselves so many times in a Discord call chatting with each other about what cards should I put in my deck, and someone names a card, and then the other person looks it up and is like, oh, that's cool, and adds it to their deck.
Or more likely, they go, oh, how do you spell that?
Yeah, there you go. And what we'd love to do is allow you to invite people to edit your deck with you, and then they can add stuff with you. It adds a lot of complexity. We definitely do need to redesign some of our infrastructure with that in mind. But we have plans, and we are hoping that, again, before Decronomicon 3, I like using that because, it's Decronomicon 3. Who knows when it will be?
Yeah.
But we do have plans for that, and it is on the near horizon. This isn't. I think we did actually mention it in our last Decronomicon. And at that point, it was just like, wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah, I think that was. I think that's exactly what it was. It was, what would you like to do? Pie in the sky, dream for Archidekt, and it's like, wow, this would be amazing.
The term we had in our notes, yeah.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah, pie in the sky.
That's hilarious.
But at this point, Mike and I have had conversations. We've looked into the technology. It's there.
We're also just a lot more competent as engineers to build something like that.
I'd like to think we're better as engineers at this point.
Oh my God, without question.
When the floor is the floor, yeah.
What's the expression? There is no worse engineer than you yesterday, or something.
Yeah. I have yelled at myself in the past when looking at old code before, and it's kind of weird to think that some code in Archidekt is old at this point, but Archidekt is 3-ish years old at this point, and in coding terms, that is ancient. So we're working on it. Those two things, the reason that they have not been things that we've just hammered out like some of these other features is they will require us to rework some stuff. Some stuff that's coming probably more in the near future that requires a bit less reworking of our entire infrastructure.
Not an entire rewrite.
Would be deck tokens. This is another one that we've gotten a lot of requests for. People want to just automatically see what tokens their deck produces, and get the art for them, all that good stuff. This is data that Scryfall provides. So this is something that we definitely plan to do. We want to have a nice, clean interface to do it, which is, again, why we haven't just cranked out the update. But this is something that's coming probably in the nearer future. Another non-technical thing is we've had a Patreon reward for a while saying that we want to do a Twitch stream. And we have not done that yet. And we have not forgotten about it. It's just that, again, it's one of those things that we didn't want to just crank out without putting too much thought into it. And we are thinking about, and more than thinking, planning a specific deck building stream where we have probably me, but probably with the assistance of Jeremy and Mike, building a deck on stream on Archidekt. And this will help us do a couple things. First of all, hopefully entertain you. Second, allow people to see Archidekt in use and in chat kind of give us live questions, suggestions, feedback, different things. Just see someone who knows how to use Archidekt use it, so you can see some of those features that maybe you didn't know existed.
It also gives
so that's on the horizon.
It also gives us an opportunity to get feedback on using the site from the perspective of people who aren't us, which is good because as people who built the site, you can imagine that we tend to not necessarily see things the way other people see them who maybe didn't necessarily build the site and know its ins and outs entirely. So getting that different perspective is invaluable and just incredibly useful for making the site the best it could possibly be.
Yeah. I guess another non-technical thing, we're commissioning some art We'll give you some more details on that hopefully soon. We're keeping it a bit under wraps. We're excited. We want to announce it the right way, but we're commissioning some art, and that will have a little something to do with altar sleeves, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. If not, look it up. It's pretty cool. And that altar sleeves will also come with some things on Archidekt. So just a little spoiler there for you. That should be coming in the near future.
What do we want to move on to next? We're just addressing our notes here. Stuff going on in the Magic world. What are we looking forward to? I take that one. I'll run with that one. I'm looking forward to getting back together with friends and playing games and going to GPs, or not GPs, Magic Fests or Command Fests, and just...
There you go. There you go. That's a term that has supposedly been phased out of the Magic lexicon, but I'm sure people will be calling them GPs for a long time.
Indeed.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it was perfect. Yeah, just being able to... It's funny, we actually, everyone in our play group has been fully vaccinated for a few months now, thankfully. But with Delta on the rise and the numbers in our respective areas, it's just been harder and harder to justify getting everyone together. Similarly, with GPs spinning back up soon, same thing, right? It's you just kind of have to ask yourself, do I feel comfortable? And I know a lot of people will, and that's awesome, and I am excited for that. But that I look forward to the day when I can say the world has indeed gone back to normal.
Yeah, we obviously at Archidekt love brewing. It's a half of the game for us is brewing these exciting decks, sharing ideas. But the issue is it is only half of the game. The other half is sharing those brews with other people. And yeah, I'm right there with you, Mike. It definitely feels like something's missing. We've used Spell Table between friends. If you haven't used Spell Table, check it out. It's a lot of fun.
Seriously, shout out to Spell Table. Awesome application.
But that other half of the game is just showing those brews to other people, playing around a table. So we're looking forward to that. Yeah. Let's not be downers here. I think everyone understands that. Everyone's in that place. Everyone's ready to get back to their friend groups and play. So how about a more positive note? Something that's been happening for a while in the Magic community that hopefully some of you have tuned into is the Casual Magic podcast with Shivam. It's hard to describe exactly how well that resonates with us. The podcast, if you haven't listened to it, it's not quite your usual let's talk about a commander and all the cool things that you put in the deck every week. It's more talking with people about their experience with Magic, about what it means to them, and that really resonates with us. So much so that we have decided to enter in with a partnership with Shivam. And again, there will be more things on the horizon that we'll be announcing with that. So this is just a little bit of a spoiler. But we're going to be working together to both support casual Magic, and in the flip side, Shivam is going to help us make Archidekt even better. He's had some good ideas for us throughout the entire time we've been alive. He's used Archidekt on off and given us tons of suggestions. And he has some more, and you'll be seeing some of those in the future.
Very exciting stuff.
All right. Do we have anything else for the people?
Not really.
For the good of the order.
For the good of the order, of course. Not particularly, right? I hope that we do this again sooner. It's always fun chatting with users and just talking about the state of Archidekt. So, yeah, I hope.
You know what's even more fun?
What's that?
Talking with you.
Oh, that
we don't do it enough.
That didn't sound sincere at all.
Yeah,
that was very nice of you.
Wait,
I wasn't expecting that. We've been messing with each other all day.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, Mike and I, as I've mentioned, have been friends for a while. So, and we are no longer living in the same city. So sometimes our talk throughout a week is just Archidekt or just tech. So it's nice to just talk with you for a bit, Mike.
Just chit chat. That's fair. I didn't even really consider that. We haven't really chatted since the last time you were in town.
Right. So we apologize if Decronomicon 3 is just Mike and I talking about video games we're excited about. If you would like that, like, comment, subscribe, hit that motherfucking like button, smash it, if you will.
Whoa.
Unless you're listening on a podcast, in which case I don't know what you would do then. Just find our email, shoot us an email, address it to whom it may concern, and Jeremy will love that. Yeah, cool. But we'll do this again sometime.
We will.
At the very least, to get you guys updates on what we're doing. We'll especially with the changelogs, with the way we redesigned the homepage to have the news a bit more visible, we'll be having a bit smaller of those coming out more frequently, so you guys get more of a sense through that way of what we're working on. But
you could always check us out on Twitter. We post about all updates on there, and as well as stuff like, we didn't talk about this at all. We've started doing deck building competitions on there as well. So check us out there.
Yes, that is at Archidekt. For those of you that don't know how to spell Archidekt, which is Mike and I sometimes, that's ARCHIDEKT. Possibly one of the biggest mistakes Mike and I made in our Archidekt careers.
I don't know if I'd call that possibly. I think that's up there.
It is. That is our single biggest
we're
mistake.
into quit to deep, but that was a mistake.
100%. I love the name. Don't love looking at our Google search analytics and seeing all the ways that people mistype
People find us. People find us.
People do find us. The fact that I'm seeing it means that Google sorts it out. But man,
Twitter would also be a way to find out when Andy and friends are going to be doing that Twitch stream, deck building.
Yeah, we'll
so
post
if you're
that
interested
on the
in
website
that,
as well. But yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Of course. So if you're interested in that, be sure to drop us a follow. If you've hung out with us this long, thank you to listening to our rambling. As you can tell, we're both engineers. We don't really talk on the mic very often. So
yeah. And again, like, comment, subscribe if you want a developer podcast where Mike and I get into the nitty gritty about var versus const versus let in JavaScript. Yeah,
is an idea. That we could talk about. You want to hear some engineers go off on some web development. That sounds like a joy.
Our 2 listeners would love it.
They probably would. Engineers are very vocal about that. Anyway, now we're actually rambling. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for joining us.
We love you all, and we'll see you again soon.
We'll talk to you next time.